Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Secrets of My Success, which is aimed at everybody from those in their 20s just starting out in their careers to those who are well established, to give them top tips, ideas, insights on how to be more successful, more productive, more effective in their careers. And I'm absolutely delighted we have got today Charlotte Thorne of Capital Generation Partners joining me. Now, Charlotte used to be at the Treasury, and I can tell you, as somebody who works in government myself, the Treasury only hire the absolute best. Okay, and you can take that from me. So, Charlotte, I'm going to allow you to introduce your firm. I know you work with family offices. I know you work in investment, but I think it's always better coming from the person you're interviewing if they describe their firm, because they can always do it with a far greater passion and enthusiasm. So tell me about Capital Generation Partners and why you set it up, who you deal with in the space you're in.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alpesh. So we are investment managers. We manage money for the wealthiest families in society. So in our jargon, it's ultra high net worth clients. In our jargon, also typically it's family offices. Now, when I started out in this business, I didn't know what a family office was. So if viewers don't know what it is, that's no reflection on them. It is quite a rarefied world. But what we're doing basically is investing individuals and families of significant wealth, investing their money in a range of opportunities from across the globe. What makes family offices different to other investors is, one, the size and scale. So for us, a typical client is probably $30 million plus, but more usually there will be multi-hundreds of millions. So that puts them in the institutional category. So they are, massive institutional investors, but they're not a pension fund. They're not a sovereign wealth fund. There are individuals and there are families behind these pools of capital. And when you're working with individuals, it doesn't matter how wealthy they are. They're individuals and they want to be treated as individuals. So it's an unusual niche that we're in, serving these institutional size, businesses effectively, but where there's very much an individual or a set of individuals at work there. So we're not dealing with, any number of kind of relatively interchangeable CEOs. We are dealing with extremely wealthy individuals who are used to being treated, in a certain way. So we have to adapt what we do to what they want. Also take advantage of what they know about the markets that they're in. Many of them have operating businesses. They're extremely knowledgeable. They want to invest further into their areas. So one of the things we do is sort of steer into that area. So that's what we do. We build portfolios for families. We do real estate for families and direct investing, because typically families in this space want to do all of those things. So we work across that whole set of asset classes. And we are now $4 billion in assets under management. We've got a team of 50 in London. But one of the things that I think for me that's really powerful about the firm is that it's still owned by the three founding partners, of which I'm one. So we built this firm. I, as you say, came from a civil service background. So I didn't have a financial services background and I didn't have an entrepreneurial background. And I never thought of myself as an entrepreneurial person, but by accident, I've ended up, being involved in creating this, really quite significant institutional player. And that's, I think, really interesting for someone like me, to hear that actually you don't have to think of yourself as an entrepreneurial person, but if these opportunities come along, you should probably think about whether you can take them or not.
That part's really fascinating in particular, because I know from, being in asset management, my LinkedIn audience will be, I happen to know some of the family offices who have invested in our funds, but there'll also be pension funds. There'll be people in wealth management as well. So there'll be a group of people who might be potential clients, but there'll be another group of people who'll be looking at this thinking, wow, I'd like to do that. And then, as we spoke just before we started the interview, women are disproportionately underrepresented in finance. So there'll be a whole audience there who'll be saying, how do you even begin? So let me start at the beginning, as it were. How did you get into this, given that, as my wife is, you're a civil servant, which in many ways is quite removed from the world of asset management and entrepreneurship. So how did that happen? What advice would you give somebody who wants to make that leap, that jump? How do they even go about it?
How does that happen? I mean, it was quite an unusual move, and I think there was a lot of serendipity involved there. But actually, many of the skill sets are the same. So in the civil service, what you're doing is working with the people who have the power, so the ministers, and you're not one of them. You are a servant to them, and you're creating or providing, doing deep due diligence and analysis on a particular problem and providing the minister with a recommended way forward. But in the end, it's not your decision. And some of those skills are really interchangeable with wealth management, because you're not the wealth owner, but you are trying to provide a really decent set of analysis to your clients or to your internal investment committee about what's the right thing to do. And what's also similar is that there isn't one right answer. You're trying to find a way through a very, very complicated, noisy set of signals, and you're trying to find a way through, and you're trying to find a long-term set of solutions for people. So I think if you're interested in those kind of problems, there is quite a lot of read across. You're also used to working with, ministers who can be extremely demanding, quite rightly. They've been elected into their role and I have not. So you're used to dealing with people who are really demanding, who expect a lot of you, and you are in a position of only being the advisor, but you also have to command their respect. So, it's no good being, terribly meek and mild. You have to be confident in your view, because you've based it on research and you're going to give them some really sort of solid guidance. And in the end, when those relationships work, they work really well because they know they can trust you. So I would say those skills are quite transferable. Making the leap is difficult. I will say that. And I think I was just fortunate because what happened was I saw a job ad for this particular family who were looking for someone who'd worked in the civil service because they understood about that skill set, and who could speak French, which it so happened I could, although not all that well, and I haven't ended up using it all that much, and who knew a bit about finance. Well, I actually didn't really know that much about investment finance, but I knew, obviously, I was comfortable with numbers and money and so on. So I thought, well, I'll go and see what this is all about. And when I met the family, in all honesty, I still didn't know what the job was about. I still didn't know what a family office was. But what I thought was, okay, you're really interesting people, and I think you have integrity, and I'd like to learn from you. So how is that useful to other people? Well, unless you see that particular job ad, it's probably not that useful. But I think what I find about it is actually what's been powerful for me is working with interesting people. So not so much the field, but the interesting people has been, an important guiding light for me, just by accident. So I went to meet these people. I found them interesting. I thought, I don't understand what you're doing, but I want to know more. And that's, 20 years on, we're still working together.
Well, there's several elements there which I know my audience will be particularly interested in. One is, it wasn't a conventional career path, yet can lead to being hugely successful. I often come across people in their 20s who are like, okay, I've got to do this, then I've got to do this, and this is what the careers officer said. You've got to join PwC, then you've got to do this. And clearly, your testimony that you don't need to. You should look outside of that at institutions most people haven't heard of, such as family offices and the civil service. Of course, one of the great things about our civil service is they're generalists who can become very good at being specialists. And there's one part of what you said I want to pick up on. You mentioned skills. Now, the skills you mentioned, they're not generally taught at school or university as a rule. How do you advise people to, whatever level of their career they're in, to pick these up, to improve on these, to hone these skills? So like you, when the opportunity happens, whether it's good fortune, as you said, or accident, serendipity, you're prepared for it. You've got those skills in place. What are the secrets there? How do you go about that?
Well, how I put it to people is that very often talking about in the world of investment and generally financial services, very often people are either extremely good on the maths and quant side and less good on the people side, or they're extremely good on the people side and less good on the math side. And that will tend to dictate which part of the industry they go into. So they'll either go over here and be a sort of quant hedge fund manager or, an actuary or what have you, or they'll go into sales. And actually, I think one of the really useful things I say to people who are starting out is, you'll know which end of that spectrum you're on, because you'll have been good at maths since you were at primary school, or you'll have been one of the humanities kids since you were 10, 8, whatever. So where you are pretty much on that spectrum. Whichever end of it you're at, try to get a decent understanding of the other side. So just try and get better at the other side. So if you are, for example, if you are a salesperson, you're probably never going to be the CIO. You don't need to try and be the CIO, but you need to be able to talk that language. So whether that means, taking on some extra courses or, doing some kind of finance courses. I mean, a lot of our team have done the CFA, for example, or just by sitting in a room and absorbing this information over time, which has been my approach. I think knowing that you need to understand that in quite a lot of detail without feeling that you need to be the king of that area, I think is really important. And similarly, if you're a maths person and you're good at spreadsheets and you're good at modeling stuff like that, you need to get really good at talking with people and communicating with people. In some ways, I think that can be a harder transition to make, but it is something you get better at with time, and it's something that you don't notice yourself improving. It's not like you can take a course in how to be not like you could. There is a sensible course you can take in how to be a better people person. But the more you go to events, the more you talk to people. I know at the beginning of my career, I would have been very dismissive of the value of that. But actually, towards the end of my career, I think these are probably the most important things I did, just like building those connections, understanding how to work with people, understanding what people are really asking you when they're asking you a question. Very often they're not asking you the actual question. They're asking you to share in some deeper anxiety, and getting better at understanding that and interpreting it is really crucial. So I think that kind of bilingual ability in investment management, if you've got that sort of bilingual skill, it's incredibly valuable because most people don't have it.
Yes, no, I know from the questions I'm asked, everything from is the CFA still, so quite a technical question, is the CFA still valuable? All the way up to the latter part of what you've answered, because I've got to talk next week to the civil service about the importance of networking, and I'm probably just going to copy verbatim what you've just said, and then I'm going to give them your details after my talk. Otherwise, if I give it before, they'll just bump me off and have you instead, which they should. But because the things that you said are still, people somehow, very often they know this, but they still don't do it. And I think when they hear somebody such as yourself repeat it and says, look, I know it's not, at the start of your career, the nicest thing always, don't you have to go out and you feel your bottom of the rung of the ladder, and the person sort of looking over your shoulder, oh, is there somebody more important I'm going to talk to? And you think, oh. But as you said, it's that 1 or 2 meetings and it stays with you, and you meet the same person maybe year after year, and before you know it, they're the ones opening the doors for you.
Absolutely. We just had the most, sort of side topic, but we had the most interesting discussion recently with some of the scientists who created the Oxford vaccine. Right. And they were completely fascinating, and you suddenly think, oh my gosh, I should have done this field. I've got no talent in this area, but it's so interesting. But B, what struck me was one of the things, this was Professor Sarah Gilbert and that team, one of the things they did, and I had no idea this was how science worked, was they just picked up the phone to colleagues in Brazil or someone that they'd once worked with in Kenya, said, can you help us? We're running clinical trials. We need someone. And it wasn't through formal organizational networks. It was just people that they knew, and they made it happen that way. And I found that absolutely fascinating. Yeah. And actually, yes, I'm sure that, many organizations are not that good at doing it. I'm not that good at doing it personally. It's a sort of, it's not in my nature, but you force yourself, you make yourself, and you get better at it.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, when you do, because so few people do it, when you do get a request like that, even if it's somebody you only met 10 years ago, or you might not have met, but it's a nice, polite request, you take note. because so few do it. And I know I've been on the receiving end of those, and like you, I don't tend to do it. You know, I'm sure, like you do, you probably ask somebody else, do you know somebody who knows somebody who can make an introduction?
Make a gentle introduction. Yeah.
And then it, you know, and it still doesn't happen. And I think sometimes the more effective thing is to just ask the person, look, this is what I'm doing. I think it's rather important. Can we have a talk? And it's amazing how often people are so receptive, because they do want to help.
Yeah.
Would you believe our time is almost up already?
You're talking too much.
We barely started. Well, we barely started. And, you know, it's always the case with these things. I could go on for a whole hour. I want to ask you very quickly, therefore, several things. So, like I said, I've got an audience of all ages, all genders. I would have said both genders, but all genders. What lasting tips do you want to give them? The uncommon wisdom that you've come across over the years, which, you know, isn't out there in the books and the textbooks and the quotes and all the rest of it that you see on the internet, that you think will be having which will have a lasting impact on them?
One of the things, actually, this is a phrase that got used at the Treasury a lot, and still I often find myself saying it, is don't let the best be the enemy of the good. So in Treasury terms, that just means that there isn't a perfect solution. Let's try and work out what is a good enough solution to help us move forward. And I think when you're at the beginning of your career, you often feel you've got so many routes you should try, and maybe I should be this and I should be that, and everyone else is doing something amazing, and you maybe feel like you're just sort of stuck doing nothing. So you look for the perfect opportunity. I don't think that's the right way forward. I think just it's another way of saying just do it. Just get out there and do something. Find interesting people to work with and work with them. And it doesn't matter if the underlying topic is initially you think is quite boring. That doesn't matter. What matters is you've got interesting people around you who can uplift you, guide you, you can learn from them, and you've made a start. And then network effects start happening, and you're on your way. So I think that's really my advice. Don't wait for the perfect opportunity. Just get out there and keep moving forward.
I love that. And I think that's really going to resonate with the audience. I think there's quite a lot of people that I come across who are almost paralyzed by the options, or trying to, you know, they think there's only one right door to go through, and if they don't do it, their whole life's ruined and there's no going back and all of this. And you and I know that's actually not the case at all.
Yeah.
But that momentum, that just movement, because when you and I are hiring people and we see it on the CVs and we see, oh, well, actually they kept doing this and this and this and that, you know, that's a lot better than, well, they were trying to figure themselves out.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah. Up a mountain somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to say an Ashburn, but Charlotte, thank you so much. Charlotte Thorne of Capital Generation Partners, thank you so much for giving your time today. I know it's going to be inspiring for my audience and beyond, and that's for sure. And I'm going to reconnect you to people in the civil service, if you don't mind, because I know from my wife, who heads up the venture capital unit, she'll definitely be very interested to, you know, reuse your experiences, as it were, to a broad audience. And I think it'll be incredibly important to get it out to them, and also to one or two other colleagues in the Department for International Trade. I think the more we amplify the things that you've mentioned in this, the greater the value it will be to a large group of people. So thank you so very much.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you. I mean, I still care a lot about what happens in the civil service. Obviously, it affects us all. So really, really important.
Thank you. Thanks very much.